Hello. Today I'm excited to be joined by Jayson Davies, occupational therapist and fellow of the American Occupational Therapy Association. He's also the host of the OT Schoolhouse podcast. He's an expert in school-based practice and entrepreneurship in occupational therapy. So, we will be diving into the topic of artificial intelligence in school-based practice, including recent research and actionable takeaways you can implement right away. Welcome to Pediatric Pioneers, a MedBridge podcast where we conquer challenging topics for the pediatric therapist through conversations with pioneers who have blazed new trails in our practice. Our aim is to deliver actionable takeaways for practitioners like you. To receive continuing education credit for this episode and access bonus resources, be sure to check out medbridge.com. Hello, I'm your host, Nicole Quint, and I'm an occupational therapist with over 20 years of experience in practice and academia, specializing in pediatric practice and the improvement of occupational participation and performance through my expertise on executive function, visual perception, social emotional learning, sleep, and sensory processing. It is my passion to support pediatric therapists like you so that you can best serve the families under your care with evidence-based practice solutions, easy to implement advocacy approaches, and new ways to lean into your skills within the challenging pediatric landscape. Welcome, Jayson.
Hey, how you doing, Nicole?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. It's a Friday afternoon, but thank you everybody for listening, no matter what time of day or what you're doing. Appreciate everyone being here and happy to be on here with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you joining us. I know you have quite the following. So go ahead and get us started by sharing a little bit more about yourself, how you as a school-based OT moved into the entrepreneurial realm and really kind of providing all this you have a lot of different forms of support for school-based OTs.
Yeah, so I started out in school-based OT directly out of school back in 2012, so over a decade now, and jumped right into it as a contracted therapist at a district here in Southern California. And I was only there for about a year because I wanted to move into a district position. And when I did that, I actually ended up working at a quote unquote rural district by the standards of California, and it was just me and one OTA. A few years later, after justifying my workload and my caseload, and having 120 kids between myself and an OTA, we were finally able to justify bringing on another OT. That was Abby, and eventually Abby and I, we were having our OT meetings, our joint OT or our collaborative OT meeting. It was like just the two of us, and we were both, and our OTA as well, the OTA that we worked with. So there's 2 to 3 of us depending on the meeting. And, me and Abby were both brand new to OT. I mean, we're talking like 2, 3 years into our career, and we're collaborating with each other. We're just like going in circles because both of us are new. And that's kind of when the idea of the OT Schoolhouse came about. We're like, there's nothing out there. Like, there's no support for OT practitioners online at the time. And, this is 2015 to 2017. There's no podcast. There weren't YouTube channels. There's nothing. And so, it wasn't like we had this idea to start a business. We just wanted to start something to like collaborate with other OT practitioners outside of our small district. And so the OT Schoolhouse was born. That's kind of where it came from. And yeah, I've been doing that for nearly 10 years now. We have the podcast, we have all the different supports that we have. And it's just been really fantastic to kind of talk with OT practitioners every single day and learn what's difficult and support one another. I often like to say, like, I don't always have all the answers, but I'm willing to, talk through different things and, create solutions. It's like always going through, the scientific experiment, right? You got to kind of go through all 5 steps before you learn what works and what doesn't work. So it's fun.
I love that your story and so many other OT entrepreneurs that I know, I call them OT-preneurs.
Yeah.
It always starts with this altruism, right? Of trying to
Hmm.
help other OTs or help their clients or the population that they work in. And so it's kind of, it's always a fun thing that always kind of starts with this, just trying to help others. I think that's
Yeah.
just ingrained in all of us, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
So we have a lot of, obviously we have pediatric OTs, but also SLPs who listen to us
Hmm.
and probably a sprinkling of some physical therapists as well. So I'm really excited to have you on today talking about school-based therapy related services. And we're going to be talking specifically about AI, which I think
Hmm.
is really exciting and also important. So as a business owner, as a supporter of school-based OTs and beyond, how did you start delving into this world of AI and bringing it to your educational platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to be a tech person, although I don't code. I don't know anything about coding, but I am. I have worked. Let's put it this way: when I was a high schooler, I was the one opening the computer, adding memory into the computer.
Mm.
Versus, I know some people have never done that, right? So I don't know how to code, but I'm kind of a techie by OT standards, I think. And I also like to learn. I mean, I worked an hour away from home, and that was my podcasting time. And there weren't any OT podcasts at the time. So I was listening to a lot of podcasts about business, about technology, about AI, even. And so, whether it was on a drive or out on a walk with my dog, I was hearing about ChatGPT. And this was, 2022, November 2022, about, I believe, when ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever it was came around. And like, man, what? This is crazy. Like, how can this help us? Like, is this going to take our job? Can it help us? Like, what can we do with this? And so, I didn't dive into it right away. But the more I heard about it on podcast, the more interested I became in it. And so eventually, I popped open my browser, went to Chat GPT, and was just blown away. Like the first few things that I just asked it. Like, I mean, I was already doing the OT Schoolhouse at the time. I was supporting OTs, and so I wanted to figure out how this could be used for occupational therapy. And yeah, it just continues to blow my mind away every single day. Like just this morning, I used ChatGPT to build an application that looks at handwriting and like grades the handwriting. It's terrible. It sucks. It cannot grade the handwriting at all. But I did that within 15 minutes. Imagine, and with no coding experience. So imagine if I spent 2, 3 hours, 4 hours a week on it, where we could get with that. And so I just think it's pretty amazing what can happen.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you had said something about you see how this could help us do the things that we don't really enjoy
Yeah.
doing, right? So
Yeah.
what are some of those things that you think AI really can help us, with our tasks that we have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think there's this big fear, right, that AI is going to take over our jobs, but then at the same
Mhm.
time, we're also thinking that AI is terrible anytime we get something from it. Like, oh, it doesn't understand the integration of visual and fine motor to make VMI and handwriting. So it kind of goes both ways. That like we're scared of it, but we also sometimes don't think it's that great. That said, there's so many areas that OT practitioners are already using it for. OTs are using it to treatment plan. They are putting in a goal and saying, "Hey, what can I do for the next 3 weeks to support this goal with my student?" OT practitioners are already using it for evaluations, of course, in a HIPAA compliant and FERPA compliant way. And I think speech therapists and PT practitioners are as well. We're inputting our notes, whether they be shorthand or long form, and saying, "Hey, help me make sense of this," or turn my shorthand observation notes into a narrative that actually fits in my report. Or maybe we give it our observations, we give it an idea of what the assessment tool scores were on the SPM or the BOD or whatever the speech therapists and PTs are using, that we can then say, hey, based upon this observation and these scores, what patterns are you seeing? Like, do these line up? Are they different? So we're using it in a lot of ways. I think mostly we're using it to support our job. And what I mean by that,
Mhm.
like we're using it to support our documentation. We're using it to support making our lives easier. And I think what we'll talk about a little bit later is maybe flipping the script on that and using it to support the students that we serve and the clients that we serve.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you brought up, I think, what'd you say, 2022,
Yep.
or 2023? I go back when is probably the same around like November of that year, and I was at the Visions conference in Florida, which is a school-based conference, and it was
Mm,
myself and a colleague. We were probably 2 out of maybe 5 OTs that were at this conference in Florida, but we knew someone there. He was one of the he basically is one of the providers of this conference, and he came up to us and was showing us ChatGPT, and he said, "What's a question you want to ask it?" And I said, "What is occupational therapy?" And we always
Mm,
say no one knows what occupational therapy is,
yeah,
and the what came out of it was a little shocking because it was pretty accurate. And I remember we
there you
both
go.
kind of thought, "Oh, this is interesting." And,
Mhm.
I kind of have been using it ever since trying to figure it out and, having the same questions as you. And a lot of it is really to help me with what I do every day.
Yeah.
But like you said, I do want to get into like, how do we flip that a little bit later? So, but it's definitely a tool that, probably gives a lot of benefits and opens up a lot of questions. So, on that note, what does the recent research say about service providers using AI, how they're using AI? Can you give us the highlights of the most important takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. And caveat here, right? Like with AI, research that comes out is already behind because AI is moving so fast, right? Like ChatGPT,
Right.
OpenAI, Anthropic, they're putting out new models like every week, which is, faster than any OT research or PT or speech therapy research will ever happen. And so things are a little bit behind. Um,
Mhm.
that said, some of the research or most of the research that has been done has been either A, kind of exploring what's possible, or B, looking at the perceptions of therapists, how they're using it and whatnot. So, what it has done, there has been some interesting articles. One comes to mind. The tool is called the Stega. I couldn't tell you what it actually stands for, but basically, they were trying to figure out is could this digital based tool in essence, look at a student's visual motor integration and replace it. Another one looked at an origami and coloring task, and they basically said to the kids, fold this piece of paper, right? Copy this origami, um, whatever it was, and then also color in these shapes. And please mistake me for not having, or please excuse me, I should say, for not having the exact details. But they then used AI to basically score those two tasks, coloring and origami, and then compared that to the kids' VMI scores, and they found a correlation between that. So, yeah, that's some of the research about like what is happening. One of my colleagues who did some research with myself on AI, and I'll share that research in a little bit. She's not in the school-based realm, but she works with a company, and she's kind of the director of research. That title may not be correct. I will help get that further. But she is helping the company to basically use camera video footage of infants and basically screen infants based upon their movement patterns. So like these are the types of things that are happening every day, like that we don't see as practitioners, but it's pretty amazing. um, Kind of on the flip side of the research, like what the perceptions are among practitioners. And I did go and look at a speech therapy article as well as the article that myself and Dr. Fairfield did, or the research that we did, I should say. And practitioners are optimistic, but they're also super fearful. We're scared of what the ethical concerns are. We are scared of what it might mean for our profession long term, but at the same time, we're like, yeah, it's going to save me 20 minutes for on documentation every day. Like, yeah, let's go for it. So, um, people are cautiously optimistic, I would say.
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. I think that's maybe little bit about how I feel as well. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and so I mean, I know that there's some interesting things going on about, like what you were saying with the video and the visual stuff. And is there anything in the research about eh, I think what I think about is the hard thing for to replace is the clinical reasoning. Is there
Hmm.
anything that they're doing that's showing how it could maybe support clinical reasoning without taking it over? Or anything along those lines,
I
like treatment planning or anything like that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say there's research out there about that in particular. I think that most OTs are experimenting with that, whether they would want to admit it or not. Um, I don't think we are anywhere near a robot conducting the bot 3, plugging that into a computer and analyzing it. I don't think, especially in the schools, I mean, let's be honest here. Anytime you're working with a child, especially under, the definition of a child, 18 or under, the rules, man, there's so many rules and for good reason, right? Like, I do not see video observation of children and scoring based upon that video observation coming to schools anytime soon. Like, that's just not something that's going to happen in the schools, right? Like, there's just too
Mhm.
many guardrails. Um, I don't know, knock on wood maybe, but like those things will probably happen in a hospital setting. Those things might happen in other settings where, you know, they're more front forward, I guess, or forward thinking when it comes to AI technology and efficiency and all that fun stuff. But I think within the schools, we're going to be a little bit slower pace and more methodical with the AI use. I think right now it's really limited to just the chat GPTs of the world, the Geminis, the Anthropics. Like that's primarily where we're
Mhm.
using it. Now, I will say that you can absolutely put your observations into ChatGPT, give it the VMI and Bot2 and SPM scores, of course, de-identified, and we can talk about ethics if we want to in a little bit.
Mhm.
And you can kind of even guide it in what you're thinking. And then you can say, "Hey, does this make sense? Like, am I on the right track? Do these
Mhm.
scores back up what I'm thinking?" And also provide me research that shows that that is true, or tell me I'm wrong, tell me that I am making a mistake here, and
Mhm.
see what the research or what the ChatGPT bot will tell you.
Right. And I think, adding in another layer, I can see it being helpful for evidence-based practice too, because
Hmm.
a lot of therapists might not have access or it's time consuming. You can go into Perplexity and have it actually do a quick evidence-based search of recent
Yeah.
information to guide you.
Have you
So
found that to be?
is that
I,
something
I
you're
want to
hearing
ask
people
you.
are doing?
Well, no, not that you're hearing. I know people are doing it, but here are
Mhm.
the not the concerns, but the barriers that I've run into that. Um,
Mhm.
for example, if you ask ChatGPT, Perplexity, I don't know, I don't use Perplexity, so maybe you have a better insight on that. But if you ask ChatGPT for research related to fine motor skills, um, it's going to typically point you to an AJOT article, maybe an OTJR article,
Mhm.
JOT-C article. But even then, when you click on that link, unless you have the actual
Mhm.
ability to log in, you can't read the full article.
Right.
Now, here's the truth that most people don't realize is that if you can't access the article, odds are ChatGPT can't access the article either.
Yes, that is true.
Unless
Yeah.
right? Unless you're
Mhm.
downloading it and putting it into a system. And that's true. One of my favorite tools is Consensus, Consensus dot oh gosh,
Mhm.
AI maybe, and it's great for that, but I think it has the same problem.
Mhm.
Now, if there's open article or open journals, like the Open Journal of OT, like, it can access those. But we have to be careful even when we ask it for research because it can only read the abstract of most research
Mhm.
unless the article has a contract with OpenAI or with Anthropic to provide that research to them.
Right, yes, if there's a paywall, they don't have the access, so you have to feed it. I do have an advantage there because I do have access, so,
Uh-huh.
but yes, and one thing I do like to always tell people is that ChatGPT lies
Oh,
about
yeah.
articles, it makes them up.
Totally.
Perplexity, I have never seen it make one up,
Really?
but it will
That's
tell
good.
you it doesn't have access.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
was
it'll
just
tell you it doesn't have access?
yes, it will say
Oh.
that's a paywall. Mhm, yes.
Huh.
So, it's
Good
interesting,
to know.
yeah. So I'm curious too, what are some of the you were saying how it's really hard for the research to keep up, which research is really hard to keep up with anything
Oh,
anyway.
yeah.
But with AI, it is so fast moving. What is the research not showing us yet that you think would be maybe something important that we need to know?
I think the research is not showing us a lot of things because we're still trying to grasp AI, how we can use it for ourselves. It's not showing us the advanced parts that AI can do, like automation. How can it
Mhm.
save us time through automating tasks that we would have to do, on a regular basis? It's not yet showing. You're starting to see some of it come out in the more education literature as opposed to the OT literature about how it's being used to support students. And I haven't looked at all the articles. I've seen articles that say, yeah, AI, good tool for students. But then you also read things in various news outlets. It's like opposite. I mean, to a degree, it's kind of like social media a little bit. There was something recently, not related to students. Heard on one of my podcasts. I know they were citing articles, but I don't have the exact article. But they were talking about using it for mental health purposes, and how people who are lonely can use
Mm,
it. And so these are spaces that there's so much that can be done with research into AI and occupational therapy, but there's only so many OT practitioners doing research to kind of keep up with that. There's a lot of things. I think we're going to see it go into universal design for learning. I think we're
mm,
going to see more within the world of mental health because there's a lot of money and grants for mental health purposes, and we might see it there. Um, yeah, I don't know if they're. That's kind of where I see it going. Anything
mhm.
in particular you're thinking about where it could go?
The accommodations and universal design to me is really interesting. I also, I have a strong interest in executive functions, so just seeing
Mm,
how it could be maybe a tool to support,
yeah.
and seeing how that would work, with learners, I think is interesting. I think it could be interesting as a way to collect maybe data and look for patterns. Sometimes I think we kind of know anecdotally what we think we see, but then when you actually see the actual data, it doesn't always match up. And I think maybe because I instantly think about something that I'm very interested in is sort of this labeling of behaviors, right? And the
Hmm.
narrative about a lot of the kids that I'm really interested in, which are kids with neurodiversity and being labeled a behavior issue. It becomes a narrative, and it's easier to remember the negative behaviors than it is maybe the positive. And I think maybe it could be interesting to see if you could capture more of the positives,
Mm.
trends in their daily behaviors that could be something to maybe shift that narrative. But, I don't know enough to know how to do that at this point, but it's something I think about.
Do you think that would be like video or audio capture? I know like a lot of people when they go to the doctors, I haven't experienced yet, but the doctor will
Yeah.
ask them, "Hey, do you mind if I record our
Yeah.
conversation today?" And so it'll write the soap note for the doctor. Is
hmm
that kind of like what you're thinking
I'm
where it
thinking, yes,
would
I'm thinking audio and movement. Not
interesting,
video, not video. No,
not
that makes
video.
me uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie.
Right? Right? Here we
You
are
know, that
recording a podcast for AI will probably analyze the entire, YouTube version of this podcast. But yeah, no, I
exactly.
totally get that. Um,
Yeah.
it,
But that kind of brings me to, like, what questions should we be asking? I mean, there's so it's probably
oh yeah.
endless, right? But what are the questions that we should perhaps be focusing on as practitioners?
I think the biggest one is the FERPA and HIPAA compliance, like depending on where you work, right? If you're in the schools, definitely FERPA, potentially HIPAA, depending on how your school operates with billing and whatnot. And then if you're outside of the schools, obviously HIPAA. I think that's the biggest question. I think we're all using it and we're all using non-HIPAA, non-FERPA compliance of ChatGPT, right? If you're using a free version of ChatGPT or free version of Anthropic's Open, Claude or any
One.
of those that are free, you can almost guarantee they are not HIPAA FERPA compliant. Magicschool.ai, they claim to be FERPA compliant, even the free version.
Mhm.
I'll put it this way, I wouldn't trust any free version without getting the okay from my district administrators.
Mhm.
That's huge, right? Now, that said, you can still use the free tools without worrying about HIPAA and FERPA compliant if you omit all the PHI, right? If you're not
Right.
using the real student's name, if you're not using the date of birth, you can say, just name every kid Jack. Jack is, unless their actual name is Jack, Jack is a fourth grade student, and here's some data about them, help me. And then you just go back once you put it into your Word document, replace the name with the real name, right? So you can still do
Uh-huh.
that. Um, but yeah, I think the HIPAA compliance and FERPA compliance is definitely the biggest question. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, there's more. I don't. You want me to dive into more?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's go.
Keep going.
Yeah. I think another one, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, was that this constant struggle, and this is for everyone, not just OT practitioners. It's like the constant struggle, like, we don't want to use AI because it's not reliable, right? Like we talked about, it'll make
Right.
up links to random articles. Yet
Yeah.
at the same time, we're all so fearful that it's going to take over our job. So we're kind of talking out both sides of the mouth. Like, it's great, it's
Hmm.
going to take over our job, it's too good, but at the same time, it's not reliable. And I understand that, right? Like, it's a kind of a where it is now versus where it could be 5 years from now. And yeah, AI is growing and changing exponentially. We talked about that already. But at the same time, like, from a related service, from a service provider perspective, such as OTPT and speech, I think it's a long way off from when it would take our job because we are very hands on. We're very relation oriented. Um, and, robots are nowhere near. I mean, I know Elon's working on many things over there at SpaceX and XAI and all that fun stuff. But robots are so far off into the future. And we did talk a little bit about video. And yes, that could do a lot in terms of watching a student complete the bot 3, watching a student complete whatever assessment tool, watching them in classroom and making observations based upon that. But it can't take the action based upon that. It might be able to make recommendations for a student, but it can't provide the therapy itself. Um, so yeah, that's another big question I think we all have, kind of in relationship with that. People, and this came out of my research or in our research with Dr. Fairfield, was that, and this is probably true for speech and PT as well, practitioners are worried about the new generation coming out not having the clinical reasoning skills. And they're
Yeah.
also worried about the professional identity, what that will mean for the professional identity of our profession. Like, for an example, I'll ask you this, Nicole. Should we be transparent and disclose every time we use AI on a progress note on a evaluation? Or should we not disclose that we use AI? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I'm in academia, and so I kind of, I think about this on a different scale, not so much in school-based practice or how um, therapists are using it in
Mhm,
practice to help them with their, documentation, all that kind of stuff. I think disclosing if there's some guidelines that would be helpful. I don't know if
mhm.
it's a all or
I agree.
none kind of thing. I think guidelines would be helpful. I know when I'm talking to my students who are post-professional students, my recommendation is to cite it. It's a
Mhm.
resource that you used, and you wanna cite it, and you wanna use it responsibly. Again, guidelines are helpful, and I
Yeah,
think we're always kinda behind the 8 ball here when it comes to guidelines, but you try to keep up, and you try to think about this in a forward thinking way, that yes, you want to cite that you had some assistance with this, and there are certain things that you shouldn't use it for. You shouldn't have it write everything for you.
yeah,
You don't, and I do tell people, what's the golden rule? You're supposed to do something 10,000 times to be good at it. Well, if you don't do it many, many times and become good at something and you're letting Chat GPT or Claude do everything for you, are you ever
mhm,
really gonna become good at it? So there
yeah,
is a give and take there that I think when we think about just the core philosophy of participation in your occupations, what part do you give away and what part do you keep for your own skill enhancement? So I think
mhm,
there's some and performance enhancement. So I think to me it's a tool
yeah,
like anything else, but because it has so many uses, you have to have your own limits of what you're willing to use it for and how you're
yeah.
willing to use it. I like to use it for productivity and for
Me
support,
too.
and I use it like, as a collaborator, quite
Yeah,
honestly. It's like, "Help me think this through," but I still have to make the decisions. I
yeah.
still have to do the clinical reasoning. I have to still do the analysis part. But to me, it's a brainstorming tool, but I'm also a ruminator who likes to brainstorm, so I enjoy that that part with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But I
No,
do think, the FERPA, the HIPAA, those kinds of things are really important considerations,
yeah,
that we
um,
need to be very careful with. I'm to the point where, I have a paid subscription and then I use the Claude, because I also wanna protect OT's speech, PT's teachers, anybody using this for their own um, IP.
Yeah,
That's your
that's tough.
intellectual property. And
My entire website's been scraped. I already know that. So all my
yeah, and
intellectual
so
property is inside ChatGPT.
right, and so I know Chat is looser in their newer, how they put out their, what they use on their site versus Claude. I
Mm,
don't know. I feel like it's an uphill battle. So
yeah.
that's something that's a little scary as well, is the whole, yeah, like you said, scraping your IP. And it
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
as painful as it is, right?
I mean, well, you can just assume, right? If you post on Instagram, if you post on Twitter, if you're X, sorry, whatever it is,
100%.
LinkedIn, like your posts are being scraped by these bots, and
Mhm.
there's nothing that we can really do about it. I mean, every time that you go onto a website, you have to click "I accept" to whatever their terms are and stuff like that, and um, eh, like that's just going to happen. Now, going back a little bit really quickly to that, should we disclose? Like, I've had this internal conflict because if I disclose that my evaluation tool was or my evaluation report was written with support of ChatGPT, does that then decrease the perception of occupational therapy and myself as an occupational therapist for whoever's reading that evaluation? And
Yeah.
that's where I get conflicted because at the end of the day, if that evaluation report goes to court, right? I
Mhm.
can't say, "Oh, well, that was ChatGPT that wrote it." No, it's my writing.
It's
So
your
even though
responsibility.
ChatGPT supported me with that writing, it is still mine, and I have to take responsibility for that, even if I got support from ChatGPT.
But I think that's right now, that's healthcare in general, because every time I go to the doctor, I go to acupuncture and the acupuncturist
Uh-huh.
is like, "I'm putting the phone on and using Otter AI or whoever to,
Yeah.
like, capture your complaints." And so everybody's using it in healthcare,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
be honest. So is that gonna diminish everyone who gives me a report that says, um that this is what's going on with my chief complaints? I'm gonna tell you
True.
right now, I kinda like getting it that day,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
waiting a week. So,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to, does it diminish how we're perceived? Um, but I think by being timely and having things be
Mhm.
accurate, you still have to check everything. I think
Oh,
those
yeah.
might be good buffers, making sure the accuracy is there, making sure that you put your own spin on it too, I think is
A
really important.
and that's
So
exactly the second point that I like to make is that you and I, let's just pretend, right, that you and I have similar experience in school-based OT, and we're both going to assess the same student, Johnny, 4th grade student. You go and assess Johnny. We observe at the same time, right? You observe him during writing class for 30 minutes. I observe him at the same exact writing class for 30 minutes. If I use ChatGPT and you use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool, it doesn't matter, my observation is still going to come out different from
yes,
yours. Not just because I took different notes during the observation, but also because the way that you're going to prompt ChatGPT or Claude is going to be different from the
it'd
way
be
that
different.
I prompt ChatGPT or Claude. I
Right,
might ask it, write up this narrative based upon the PEO model. You
right,
might say, you know what, write up this observation using Gene Ayers' sensory integration model. And you're going to get totally different write-ups based upon that.
right.
And so even if I do cite ChatGPT, even if you cite ChatGPT use, it's going to look totally different. So yeah, I go back and forth on this all the
I
time.
think
I
if you
do
were
think
I
go
think
ahead.
if you were to disclose, I love this conversation because now you got me thinking about things. I do think if you were disclosed, I think you could say something like, "For efficiency." Like, if you put the purpose
Mm,
for it, that might give a little bit of
okay.
punctuation of how people think about it. Like I always tell everybody, you guide that narrative. So if we can guide the narrative to make it look like this is how we're using it strategically rather
Yeah.
than as a cop out, which is what some people will think, you can control that narrative. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have all the answers,
It goes back
but
to
I
the
do love
guidelines.
this conversation. Yeah, I think it's important,
Mhm.
for
And
sure.
I don't know who's gonna create them. I don't know if it's gonna be AOTA. I don't know if it's gonna be IDEA and the government that needs to create these. Like, we need guidelines, I believe, and I don't know where it's gonna come from. AOTA has opened their idea to I mean, they now have an official policy on AI. It's very short, it's
Mhm.
very brief, it's not, very well defined, but they do have a policy. They also have an AOTA Ask AOTA bot that's brand new. It just came out right before AOTA Inspire in April
Right.
a few weeks
Yes.
ago. And if you're not a member, you can use it. I think like you can have back and forth with it like 3 times a week. So it's very, very brief. But if you are a member, you have access to it. And it does have access to the AJOT and all that fun stuff. So
Mhm.
things are changing and I love it.
Yeah. Well, listen, maybe right now we put this call to action out there. I always tell people, you try to open a door, and maybe this is a
Hmm.
great opportunity for OT to take the lead, instead of always kind of complaining that we don't have a seat at the table or we don't have the
Yeah.
opportunities. Maybe this is a great opportunity to lead and say, hey, we are the experts in doing and
Yeah.
being engaged in occupations, and this is an
Mm,
occupation, something that involve our occupation of being an OT, of being a speech therapist, being a teacher, anybody in school, in the school system or special education, this is a tool that we are using within our occupations and our service delivery. So
oh
maybe
yeah.
we should be the ones to think about how this works together. Or maybe it's a great interprofessional opportunity to collaborate with speech and PT and say, hey, related services unite because there's power in
Right.
alliances, right?
Yeah.
When
Oh
you
yeah.
go against the
Absolutely.
system or you try to change a system. So, yeah, there's my little advocacy, 2 cents, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
so
Perfect.
thinking about all these heavy ideas, and it is really, really interesting, and I think, we could probably have 10 parts to this podcast. Um, the people listening to it, I'm sure, are kind of like, "What do I do? I'm a
Yeah.
practitioner. What do I
Yeah.
do? What do I do tomorrow?" Or, right now it's Friday. What do I do Monday? So how do we translate it the minimal research that's out there, but also the questions that we have into practice?
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I think the biggest key one, and I think a lot of us are afraid to do this because we're afraid of hearing the answer and we're afraid of the response being no or I don't know, is to send an email or look at your school or your employer's website and see if there is any policy related to AI.
Mm,
And once you get to that point, then find out if they do have a policy, do they have an approved AI tool? In the schools, a lot of the schools have some sort of contract with Google or Microsoft, right? Like those are the big
mhm,
2.
right.
Um, Now, depending on what level of service your district pays for, you may or may not have access to Copilot or Google's Gemini, and then again, depending on that, you may or may not have HIPAA and FERPA compliant access to Google Gemini or Copilot. And so that's the big question I think needs to be answered first because you need to know if you can put a name into a system or not. And if you get, I would get it in writing from your administrator, right? Yes, we have a FERPA approved version of Gemini. You may use Gemini full blown names, dates, all that fun stuff because it is FERPA compliant. Man, you got a cheat code, like, that's
Mhm,
fantastic. You can now actually put your full report in there. You can manipulate your full report with ChatGPT versus if you don't, you can still do it as we talked about earlier, you just have to be a lot more careful, right? No
yes.
PHI in there. Now,
Mhm,
it's also possible that your district has a FERPA compliant version of Gemini, but they still don't want you to do that because they don't trust them, and I totally understand that too. Like, you gotta do what your employer says.
yes.
So that's like the first thing. I think we need to kind of get on the same page with our employer and figure out what we can and can't use AI for, and do we have the safeguards in place to actually use it?
Mhm. That's a great idea. And everybody, I think people will be kind of surprised at what they might find,
Mhm.
because everybody's gonna find something, like you said, different. But yes, the Microsofts, the Geminis are probably the main ones out there
Yeah.
that people are using. Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, there are tools out there. I mentioned Magic School AI that supposedly is FERPA. They advertise heavily right toward the teachers. They have a few tools in there, like a SMART goal creator that an OT or a PT or an SLP might find helpful. But it's
Mhm.
definitely geared toward teacher. Their whole business model is give it for free or part of it for free to teachers. Their
Mhm.
teachers and their OTs and their speech therapists will get excited and get their district to get on board. Um, but I wouldn't trust it without having that approved plan from the district. And so you may find out that your district hasn't even had a discussion about AI. That's honestly probably the most likely outcome of this question, right? Right, reaching out to someone at your district. But yeah, I would press back and be like, hey, this tool can be really helpful. And to be honest, I'm hearing about employees already using it, and we just want to make sure that we're using it correctly and start that conversation and see where it goes. Because
Mhm.
it'd be really cool if your district has access to a FERPA compliant version of Gemini. You could do a lot with that, which kind
Mhm.
of leads to the second piece that I wanted to have a takeaway about. And that is once you find out whether or not you have access to a FERPA approved Gemini Copilot or not, then you might want to meet as a team. And that could be just the OTs, it could be just the speech therapist, or it could be all the related service providers and figure out as a team what we're willing and not willing to use AI for. Do we want to cite every time we use AI? Like as a team, figure out these decisions and these questions that we've been having on this podcast episode. Like I can't give you the answer because I'm not at your district, and Nicole can't give you the answer
No.
because she's not at your university. You
Right.
have to have these questions internally with your team to figure out what are we all going to approve and what are we going to use, and ideally that should then be notarized into the special education handbook or whatever it might be. But get together as a team and figure out what you're willing to use it for, what you don't want to use it for, and how you're going to move forward.
Yeah, that's some great advice. It kind of brings me to this idea, again, of if you put it out there, you're going to now be recognized by administrators, the district, whoever, your school,
Very
and
possible.
that's a good thing,
Yeah, I agree.
right? We are always kind of upset that we're not seen, we're misunderstood. Well, let's show what we can do. So I think this is a great opportunity for that. So, earlier we were kind of talking about the idea of using AI for, a
Mm,
UDL approach, helping with accommodations, some really cool things potentially in the therapy session. But I think one of the things that I always am wondering is what about our kids that we work with? They need
yeah,
to learn how to use AI.
yeah,
It could be something that could really help them keep up with their peers because we know a lot of times with some of the kids that we work with, the problem is how inefficient they are because of whatever motor issues or other challenges, processing issues, all these
yeah,
things. Wh How is that, in figuring into this conversation of how are we gonna use AI not for our own productivity and to help
yeah.
us, but how are we gonna help our kids use our AI, as part of
Hmm.
therapy? What are
Yeah,
your
we're
thoughts
we're
on
already
that?
starting to we're already starting to see this. I don't know if anyone else is getting all the ads on Instagram about like little tools that you can carry around that listen to your conversation every single like all day, every day, and then you can type questions into it later and figure out remember what conversations you had. But I could see that being used for some of our students who have audio memory difficulties, right? They could have this
Mhm.
device that has Otter AI built into it that's listening to their conversations. I mean, I I don't know if anyone's been in an IEP and a parent has broken down almost in an IEP because they have no idea what their student does at school. And, as a parent, I'm not quite to this level yet, but we often hear parents complain about their students or their kids. They say, "Oh, what did you do at school today?" And then you get the blank stare, I don't know, right? Well, imagine the parent who doesn't even get that because their student doesn't have verbal communication, doesn't have written communication.
Mhm.
Imagine the ability for a parent to actually know what happened at school because of some sort of AI tool. Now, on the flip side of that, my wife is an assistant principal and she just had to deal with a case where a student had a listening device on them and a paraeducator got fired as a result of something that happened.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so right, you see both sides of it, right? You see the good, you see the bad. Same thing, a big conversation topic right now is video cameras in classrooms, the good and the
Mhm.
bad, right? Um, so that's just one example. At AOTA Inspire this year, there was a gentleman speaker, and he talked about how they used AI to help a student who had a lot of difficulty with answering um, word questions. So, a short reading comprehension, listen to a story, answer the question based upon the story. And he
Mhm.
had difficulties with, answering these types of questions. He could verbally tell you what happened, but difficulty getting it out on the paper. Well, they used AI to scaffold responses to help that student. So I won't get into all the specifics, so I don't want to get it wrong. But basically, they were using AI to scaffold prompts for the student so that
Mhm.
he could then work his way up to being able to answer a full question. So there's a lot going on. You've got Coro AI out there that is, using video capture and a game with students. You've got tools like the SciMark AI that is basically a digital version of a visual motor integration scoring assessment tools. So there are definitely things coming out. Um, Otter AI can be used, being able to take a picture of your work and upload it or to synthesize or get a summary. Speechify, like students should have access to Speechify. It's an app that can take a
Mm.
picture of a book
Mm.
and read it out loud, right? For our students who have difficulty with reading, they have dyslexia, right?
Right.
Being able to listen to an audiobook. I think those have been around for a while, but it was harder to access. Like, how many times have you thought, "This tool would be great, but logistically, it's just not really good to use?" Well,
Yeah,
with
I
AI, it's
know.
becoming more logistically able to use.
Yeah, and that's true. The availability and the access is significant. Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of bringing up all these different, interest holder perspectives and the parents as well as teachers, the paraprofessionals, administrators, right, as
Oh,
well
yeah.
as related service providers. And I'm curious thinking about, and we were thinking about the kids. What are the kids saying about this? What are students saying about
Oh, good
this?
question. I don't have the answer.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna give you the answer that all my podcasts are telling me and that every graduating class this year booed anytime anyone brought up AI.
Yep.
We could talk about the environmental factors. We could talk about how, college kids are afraid they won't get a job because AI is taking the job. But that's more of, the college age students. Um,
Mhm.
as far as kids, I did again can't quote the research, but they were saying that, somewhere between 30 and 50% of teenagers are already using AI every single day. Um,
Mhm.
and it's gonna become just like it's hard not to use Google today, it's gonna be almost impossible not to use AI because it's just being embedded into everything. So, it's gonna be weird. Like, my generation, millennial generation, we had to kind of learn how to use Google. Maybe the generation slightly before me really had to learn to use Google.
Gen X.
Right? Um, but, like, th it's gonna be interesting, right? Like, kids are going to be using AI, and we haven't talked about this, but, like, right now, we have a choice to a degree right now whether or not we wanna use AI, right? If you don't log into ChatGPT, then maybe you're not using AI. But Cummings, like, you can't Google something without it automatically using
No.
AI, right?
Right.
You can turn off the Google AI feature, I believe, if you go into your settings, but that's complicated. Um, but eventually, like, we're not gonna have a choice. It's gonna be built into our EMRs. It's gonna be built into the standardized assessment tools that kids are taking. They're not gonna have a choice, I don't think. Um, and I don't know, good or bad, like, it is what it is. Like, I don't have the power to change that. I don't know. Do you,
Yeah,
Nicole?
it's here, right. Well, and I think, you just I don't know right now if we always know when we are interfacing with it
True,
100%, because we
true.
don't know the disclosure. There are really very minimal guardrails right now,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
know. And so that's kind of an interesting point as well. So, I liked your takeaways about I think FERPA, HIPAA is really significant here. And
Mhm.
I just really want to put it out there to everyone, really think about that because it's important. And then I liked your idea of the working with your team to decide and like reach out to the school and take the initiative. This is, taking initiative is a great way to help people understand what we do and how we do it, how we think, and bring our
Mhm.
strengths to the table. And then I think, um, what's your suggestion for people who are hesitant? What should they do? Maybe people that really haven't interfaced with AI or haven't, or they're
Yeah.
reluctant adopters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would not sign up for anything as far as a ChatGPT account. If you're hesitant, don't sign up for a ChatGPT account. Just go to chat.com, I think you can go to now, or Claude.com. Use the free version without creating a login, or just use Google because, as we just talked about, it's already built in there.
Right.
Then have a little bit of fun with it. The reason I say don't log in is because once you log in, it's going to start to know who you are and all that fun stuff. So don't log in.
Mhm.
Just use the free one, and plan a trip with it, or figure out if you like to cook, ask it for a recipe that's already uses, the different items you have in your refrigerator. Don't worry about OT. Just use it for something fun.
Mhm.
If OT is fun for you, use it for OT. Or PT, speech, same thing,
Right.
right? But don't log in. Don't log in until you feel like you're actually comfortable and you want to continue using it. And then you can start to kind of go down that rabbit hole. Because I will say this, I was very shocked one time because I was actually using it to help me plan a vacation. And I told it, like, give me something that my 4-year-old child and my 1-year-old child, not even 1-year-old child, will enjoy doing. And it spit out my kid's name when it told me the response.
Oh, that's
And I was
that's
like,
I'm not gonna lie, that's a little creepy.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it only knew that because weeks before I had put my kid's name into it. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I
It is still
actually
a
had
little
done that.
creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, right, you forget what it remembers, and I understand that that's creepy, but if you know ahead of time, right, you can
Yeah.
choose whether or not to give it that information. Um,
Yes. I
so
do, and
so
I
yeah.
only include myself. You know what I like to do is I like to tell it I'm creating a case study for my
uh,
students, and then
there
it's
you go.
real information, but it's a
Yeah.
pretend case study. I don't know if this really works or provides any kind of buffer, but in my mind, it
Yeah,
makes me feel a little more comfortable. But yeah, I
yeah,
like the idea of kind of playing with it without it knowing much about you. I think maybe I would add if, they do have fun with being a therapist and wanting to do it that way. One of the probably safe ways is just doing like resources, a collection
mhm,
of resources that would help a parent.
yeah.
Right, that's kind of a low kind of risk, situation. You say, "I
Are
just
you
want a list of resources in the
a
area
list?
for adapted sports." Boom.
You know how
You're
helpful
gonna
that
see,
is?
like, how easy it is and how nice, and I mean, Claude will give you a whole HTML with drop down and all the
Mhm,
information, and you'll be like,
mhm,
"Whoa, this is amazing." So there's some pretty cool things, once you start to play around with it that you can learn
it's
and,
amazing.
figure out, yeah. So,
Yeah, and
before I kind of ask you the last question, I know we have, like,
mhm,
just a couple minutes left. I do wanna bring up the complaint I hear a lot from people, and this goes back to, like, what do we do with students and helping students,
okay.
learn how to do it, but also if we're using it, this is probably a bigger conversation maybe in the university realm, but the AI is cheating. We're
Oh,
teaching people how to cheat. You're cheating if you're using it. It's laziness. Like that's sort of an argument that goes
yeah.
on out there. What's your response to that?
Gosh, how much time you have?
Sorry, I
So
should have given you some warning about that one.
So, yeah, no, it's a great question because it did come up in the research, right? The professional identity, and people worried about, new OTs not having that clinical thinking ability. And I mean, I don't know. Like I said earlier, and you've mentioned, right? ChatGPT will be wrong. And I
Yes.
think as educators, we need all the way from kindergarten. I don't know, maybe not as early as kindergarten, at least not related to AI, but as soon as kids start using AI and Google, we already are teaching, what do they call it, like web literacy or internet literacy, like
Mhm. Yes.
how to judge whether or not something is legit. Even in OT school, I remember we had to learn what a good article looks like, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
now we just have to learn what a good outcome from ChatGPT looks like and how to grade whether or not it's a good outcome. That is still clinical reasoning.
Yes.
Um, we talked a little bit about how your prompt into ChatGPT will be different than my prompt into ChatGPT. So you only get out as good of a prompt or as good of a response as you put into it. And the better your clinical reasoning before you input that prompt, the better response you're going to get. The problem there lies in, well, if people don't have clinical reasoning or haven't developed clinical reasoning before diving into AI, well, then how are they gonna be able to judge the AI tools? Well, or the AI response? Well, the same thing goes for everything else. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
how are you gonna know it's a good article? It just because it's in the AJOT or because you saw that it's a randomized control study, they, controlled for different variables and all that fun stuff. So,
Uh-huh.
um, I don't there is a skill to asking Google the right question to getting the right response. And
Uh-huh.
the same exact thing exists for ChatGPT or any other AI
God.
tool.
Mhm.
And we're going to have to learn how to do that. And that's why we have to play around with it. That's why we have to learn. Like I am a everyday user of AI and I am learning to improve my ability to use the AI as a tool every single day.
Right.
And yeah, I could take courses on this, but honestly, like, I'm getting better at it by trying new things, and I
The
think that
10,000
we're gonna
hours,
have to.
right?
Yeah, right, and that's
Right.
funny
It
because you
is.
you said that earlier, right? You
I
said, like,
did.
"Oh, if I'm using AI, I'm not gonna get the 10,000 hours in something
But I'll
else."
get the 10,000 hours with AI,
Exactly, right? Like,
right?
people right? Like, and you have to remember, this same transition has gone a billion times. No, okay, maybe not a billion, but like over and over and over through history, technology has changed our lives, right?
Right.
From the invention of the wheel all the way until where we are today with Claude Code and co-work and all that fun stuff. Like, so
Uh-huh.
we will have to learn to adapt. It is something new. We have to learn how to use it, just like email was, right? Like everyone had to. Now we
Right.
don't have paper pencil messages back and forth. We have email on our phone, and we work 12 hours a day because we get emails 12 hours a day, unfortunately.
Right.
So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
response. Yeah,
Yeah, the 10,000 hours, I have to laugh. It's kinda like the paradox, right? It enables us I get to do a lot more of the same thing over and over because now I'm more efficient. So does that get me my 10,000 times of
hmm,
doing it? But then am I getting help? So is that diminishing the 10,000 times? But I'm getting really good at AI because 'cause I'm doing that 10,000 times.
exactly,
I've made a
exactly,
whole loop
and
for myself, right?
yeah, and there is, I mean, again, I'm not looking at the individual studies. I'm just seeing the things that pop up on my news feeds, right, on social media, LinkedIn. I tend to believe what I see on LinkedIn a little bit more because people there are
Yes.
typically publishing like articles, um, and again, it's mixed. It's totally mixed as to what is going on in the brain when using AI versus what is going on in the brain when solving a math problem, and um, if it is even if you like, it goes back to the whole handwriting versus typing, right? Like,
Right.
the brain is more active during handwriting. However,
Mhm.
if the student is not efficient with handwriting, then is it still helping the brain to remember things with handwriting? Well, then maybe typing's a better option, and then you kind of move forward from there. Same thing with AI. It could be a more efficient way to get out information as opposed to the other alternatives, and so, um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting to see where we go from here.
It's true, and it does help with the limits of our working memory capacity. I will attest to that, because it can remember a lot more than we can. So
Yeah.
that is helpful if you're doing a large scale project.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
so that's something to think about as well. But you know, on that note, one thing that we might want to say before I get your last comment is, what is the dash or the hyphen called that they constantly use? Not only do they lie to us and try to butter us up, so you gotta be very
Yeah,
skeptical, and so your all the biases that you think about with research and evidence-based
yeah,
practice, we need to apply those to AI. But what is that hyphen that is just the
yeah,
dead giveaway that you're
yeah.
using AI? What is that called? You
The
told me this.
I will tell you in a second, but I gotta open this up here. First of all, you opened up the show with the word delve, which to me screams AI, but I know
Right.
it doesn't for everybody, and, like, I don't know,
Sure.
I just remember when I first started using ChatGPT, like it just liked to use the word delve. And like to me, when I see delve now in any writing or I hear someone say delve, for me, like it makes me think, huh, did that person use AI to write this? Or did that person use AI to create this script? Now I know you didn't because we already talked about this. Um, by the way, for everyone listening, Nicole was using Delve before AI. We even looked it up.
2014.
2014. Um, but the same thing. It's called the M dash, I believe, EM dash. That's what's called. That long line is. But same thing. Like AI likes to use the M dash. But we have to remember that the reason that AI likes to use the M dash is because it's trained on literature that uses the M dash. That is why it uses the M dash.
That's
So
so funny.
are we going it's going to be weird. Like when you think about 20 years from now, are we going to start writing the way that ChatGPT writes? Is it going to keep writing the way that we write? Like there's going to be this back and forth. Like we're going to learn from
Mhm.
it. It's going to learn from us. There's going to be this back and forth. And for the people who think that they absolutely know when something is written by AI, I did put a link to this study. It should be in the resources of the podcast. There has been research about that. And even the people that think they can tell when something is written by AI are only correct 50% of the time about. So whether or
Oh,
not we
wow.
think we can understand AI, we probably actually can't recognize whether or not something's AI. But
Wow.
it
Interesting.
impacts your thinking, right? Because now
Right.
everybody is naturally thinking, was that written by AI? And we're having an internal debate with ourselves all the time. Was that AI?
Yeah. Or the pictures, is that
Oh,
photo
yeah.
AI? Yeah, for sure. And the M
So,
dash is so now everybody has a fun little party trick that they can share with everybody, right? Did you know what that dash is called?
yeah,
Um, so on
yeah.
that last note, we probably touched on this already, but what do you think is the next frontier regarding AI that isn't even on our radar at this time? How can
Yeah.
we be potential futurists and get in front of the technology?
I mean, how do you get ahead of it? You don't. Maybe you start
Right?
using it, right? Maybe you start using it. Like I've said this before a long time ago. Like AI is not going to replace OT, but the OT who uses AI is going to have an advantage on other OTs who don't use AI. And I think that's going to be absolutely true for jobs in the future because we are going to start seeing EMRs and IEP systems and even assessment tools from WPS and Pearson, all the others that have AI built into it. And the better that we can use AI to use those tools better, that's going to improve ourselves as occupational therapy practitioners from now to the future, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that is a big one. Is the big change is that we're going to start seeing everything having AI directly built into it. Like, and what I mean by that is, as soon as we input our assessment tool, there's going to be a future tool. It doesn't exist yet, but there's going to be a tool out there that we input our OT assessment into, and it's going to say, "Hey, this is the best course of action based upon research for you to do the next 12 weeks." Like that's
Right.
going to exist.
It is
Um,
going to. I agree.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is big. I also think something that's going to come up because of the efficiency is automations. And what I mean by that is that we are just going to input our observations into a tool. We're going to input, whatever data we have into a tool, and then it's just going to basically automate 90% of our report, give us, the chance to look it over, make changes, make suggestions to the AI that it then changes, and then it's going to develop that 12 week plan for us. Like automations, I think are really going to start to take off. And
Mm,
again, like I said earlier, I don't know that we're going to have an option. Like it's going to
yeah.
be if you work at this district, we use AI in our tools. You can't turn it off. Like this is just quote unquote best practice now. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of research between now and then to probably say that it is best research and there's going to be training out there. But yeah, I think that's what's coming.
I love what you said that it's not gonna replace us, but if you are really adept at AI, it will give you an advantage. But
Hmm.
I think you were kinda saying it as an OT as an advantage against maybe other OTs.
Yeah, yeah,
Can I
yeah.
add
Or as a
another
speech
layer to
therapist with
that?
AI.
I
Go
think
ahead.
it could give our profession an advantage. The more that
True.
we collectively become really knowledgeable about this and we show what we do in our clinical reasoning, if we
Hmm.
start to get into whoever's creating the AI tools, and the more we're involved in that, I think we could really shape them to be really supportive of what we do instead of, um, not supportive.
Yeah,
So
and that's gonna be interesting, like, I don't know, again, OTs, we're not good with tech, we're not in the tech field very I
but we
mean,
could be.
there's probably Oh, yeah, absolutely, and
We could
someone's
be.
gotta do it, right? Like, um,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned to me the other day that you've worked with someone, I believe it was one of your students that has kind of done a little bit of that in the tech world back in San Francisco. Like, those are things that we need to do. We need to be getting into
We need
someone's
to.
gotta get into the tech world, and, you said ChatGPT had a decent understanding of OT, um, but yeah, there's so much more, and
And
maybe
that
that
was
means
like 3
partnering.
years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah,
So I agree, and I think that, we can make some headway with our profession if we, do it
yeah,
strategically. So
yep,
thank you so much, Jayson. That's all the time that we have for today. We probably ran over a little bit. I want
oops.
to thank, Jayson Davies again for his insights on artificial intelligence. You can find him as the host of the OT Schoolhouse podcast, and, we have all sorts of great, resources, related to all the things that we talked about today. So thank you so much. Thanks, Jayson.
Thank you, appreciate it, take care.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pediatric Pioneers by MedBridge. Please be sure to subscribe and listen to more of our episodes on Spotify or on your favorite podcast platform and at medbridge.com. If you're listening outside of the MedBridge catalog and would like to access the bonus resources and receive continuing education credit, simply log into your MedBridge account and complete the quiz for this episode. Pediatric Pioneers also listens to you. If there's a particular practitioner that you'd like to hear from, or if you have a question or challenge that you'd like to explore on this podcast, please let us know by leaving a comment on our Instagram posts or by emailing podcasts@medbridge.com.